Mark Rivers, welcome, and thanks for making the time. Thank you for joining us at Kajia.
Thank you, Ellie. Thanks for having me.
Starting with big picture, less money, more conflicts. Needs are rising while donations are falling. What's one thing you will cut and one thing you will protect no matter what?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. No, you've captured it exactly right. Needs are indeed growing, and donations are under pressure. I think the way I would think about it is, what do we want to protect, no matter what? And I think what's important is especially when you're under constraint, is to be very clear about your priorities and your purpose. And for the ICRC, really goes back to our mandate. What are the unique things that we can do, that the world needs us to do, that are vitally important? And for us, it's what we call protection, is really the center of what we do. And that's what we've been asked to do, by the nations in the Geneva Conventions, and so that's what we want to prioritize. And practically, what that means is to be in areas of armed conflict, particularly where there's active conflict, to be able to do things that, again, no one else can do. For example, whether it's visiting prisoners of war in detention, whether it's ensuring that civilians are protected, that they have fresh water, which is often something that goes away, that there's food and shelter for those civilians directly impacted by the conflict. These are some of the vital things that we have to protect, no matter what. And then the things you end up having to sacrifice, of course, we always are looking for, what are the efficiencies, what can we do smarter, better. We'll use that pressure to that advantage. But unfortunately, some of the things that end up getting sacrificed that we would love to do, that we might not be able to under constraint, is some of the prevention work, some of the more longer term efforts. But so we would prioritize the active conflicts, and make sure that we're living up to our mandate in that regard.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Now, all of the things that you mentioned are critical for the people you're serving. But if donations dip for, let's say, months, how long can the Red Cross keep the core work going on?
Yeah, so it's something that we looked at very carefully last year with our board, with our assembly. In fact, with the creation of the CFO role, that was one of the key topics. And it's important to know that for the ICRC, even though we're this Swiss institution, it's not that we have some secret reservoirs of mountains of gold somewhere that we can just rely on. Um, we are really reliant, at the end of the day, on the generosity of our donors. About 90% of our funding comes from nation states, from the signatories to the Geneva Conventions, if you will, and about 10% from private donations. For what we agreed is, for us to be able to operate, we want to have at any time at least about 6 months of operating capacity on hand. And that's important because, it allows us, most importantly, to respond in an emergency. So when a crisis erupts, that we have the ability to respond instantly within 24 hours. Want to be able to go, not have to wait for the cash to arrive, but allows us to operate. We also want to have enough time, if we were to see somehow a structural decline in contributions, that we're able to respond to that and adjust in a rational manner as possible. So that's how we've determined what level of liquidity do we need to have at one time, at all times.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, you mentioned that nation states are the major donors. Um, Talking about nation states, how do you how do you stay neutral when politics heat up?
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning neutrality. I think that's really important, and it's an essential. First of all, it's important to point out that for the ICRC to operate, for us to be able to do what we do, being a neutral actor and being perceived as a neutral actor is essential to be able to do what we do. For us, what's important is that we are able to have contact with all parties in a conflict. And of course, being neutral is not something that people are born naturally to be. And it's not that we don't have views and opinions, of course, right? But it's very important that we're seen as neutral actors, because this allows us to have access to the different parties, to be whether that's to be able to visit, again, prisoners in detention, or to have access into the territories, to allow us to do things. It also allows us to play this special role, even, for example, in peace negotiations, when parties are ready to resolve things. We can serve as a messenger of messages from one party to the next. We've even had cases of transporting one party to a place for negotiations, or handle some of those sort of exchanges of hostages, of prisoners, of mortal remains, those kind of functions. So one of the practical ways that we make sure we maintain that neutrality, one is from a funding perspective. That's another reason why we really believe in the principle of burden sharing, that we want to have the distribution of funding across as many actors as possible. We actually have a cap of 25% on any individual giver, not to go above that. And that's part of the reason for that, is to achieve that kind of neutrality objective.
Interesting to hear how much you all have to think and structure in a way to decrease um, leverage to build law. Now, I would appreciate if you could share one specific example of a donor condition that you would say no to.
Yeah, no, we have had examples of that. I'm not gonna, well, obviously, the confidentiality of very specific cases, but then I'll give you the nature of the kind of time where we've said no is, when a contribution is too partisan or too political. For example, it might be for only one side of a conflict specifically, or that sort of thing. That's where it starts to become a no-go for us. And we have literally said no to contributions. And I think it's important that we stick to those kind of principles. Again, the goal for us is not to be larger or to go for more contributions for the sake of contributions. We really have to make sure that we'll stay true to the mandate and to the principles that allows us to operate.
That definitely puts things into perspective. Thank you, Mark. And what's one number you check every morning to know that Red Cross is financially safe?
Yeah. So for me, as the finance guy, the number I check is it's that liquidity number basically. So how many months of operating capacity do we have? That's, to me, the ultimate measure of our financial health.
Awesome. Moving towards protecting civilians being the highest priority of Red Cross. If protecting civilians is the top goal, which programs will grow and which will shrink?
Yeah, so protection is and again, that kind of concept of protection, what we mean by that is protecting those affected by conflict. And so it's obviously focusing on armed conflict areas. This is food, clean water, shelter for affected populations. That also essential work that we do is reconnecting family. We have Restoring Family Links program, where we can either let families know about the fate of their loved ones. Again, case by case basis. Those programs are really important, and are important to sustain. Yeah, shrinking is difficult because, but we are in the process of having to do that right now. I mean, if you look back at where we were in 2022 to our projections for next year, we know that we're planning to have to shrink by about a third over that time period. Yeah, so which means that we are having to make choices, and this is extremely difficult to have to make those kind of choices because we are on the ground every day and we see the reality on the ground and what the needs are. As you said at the very top of the program, Ali, the number of conflicts are growing, not shrinking, and the needs therefore are growing and not shrinking. So this is really tortuous for us to have to choose where can we be, and so we tried to look at where does the world need us the most? Where can we have the most impact? And where is it most vital that would? But it's an excruciating choice to have to make, Ali, to be honest.
I would never want to be in that situation. Those are very difficult choices to make. Moving towards rules and regulations. Sometimes regulations can come in a way of doing good work. What's the simple fix you want from banks or governments to unblock life-saving funds?
Yeah. So interesting when we think about like what are some of the things that kind of are in the way for us. I would say before we talk about funding as such, often funding itself is not so much the barrier. It's actually just access into the territories and to be able to bring the things that we have set up into practice. So if we think of Gaza, we think of in other places of conflict. At times, this is sometimes the biggest challenge is just let us get in there and bring. aid where it's needed. This is often the biggest issue. And this is where political support from allies, from the actors themselves, can really make a big difference, and we would really advocate for that. Strictly just on restrictions and funding as such. Obviously, sometimes you'll be working in some territories which have sanctions in place. What we found certainly helpful is to have humanitarian carve-outs from those sanctions rules, which certainly facilitates things. But yeah, but this is also what we're really expert at. When you're in a place like in South Sudan or wherever in some location where the systems have really kind of broken down and are fractured. Yeah, often there's not an ATM available that's working, but how do we get those kinds of vital supplies or financial aid into those locations? That's what that's what we excel at. That's what we specialize in, is being able to do that.
So much to think about for you. Uh, Talking about moving towards diplomacy, there are new players in the international arena, like China and the UAE. How do you keep those partnerships aligned with neutral, quiet humanitarian work? No politics or PR.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the things that I think is a feature of how the ICRC has always worked. Our preferred way of working is through quiet, confidential, bilateral dialogue with all parties. And that we find is really the most effective way because and that's what builds trust with different parties. They know that what they share with us, what we share with them, will be kept in confidence. And so that's really essential. But it's really important to invest in building those relationships over time. And I think it's in the world's interest that you have an institution that is able to have those relationships across the world. That all signatories to the Geneva Conventions and the parties who are not part of the Geneva Conventions, that you have somebody who has the ability to make those kind of connections. One of the most astonishing things that I came across coming into the ICRC is to realize, we track today about 120 active conflicts. And of the non-state armed groups that are involved in those conflicts, we have some form of relationship with around 2/3 of those parties. I think that's incredible. And there's no other institution that comes anywhere close to that. And I think is a unique value that we can offer to the world to be able to have those contacts. And again, that shows up in very practical ways. It might be in being able to deliver a message. It might be able to be of assistance when it comes time to having those peace negotiations. To what can we do to try to influence the conditions to allow those kind of peace discussions to actually happen. Because in the end, that's what the world needs, is a resolution, and that's the role of nation states and the actors. It's not so much our role to do those negotiations themselves, but that has to be done by the actors. But how do we create the conditions for those dialogues to happen?
Mark, thank you for covering that. My last question today. If I donate $100 today to Red Cross, where does it make the biggest difference tomorrow?
Yeah. So one thing we're really proud of is for contributions that come for the field. 93 cents of that goes to the field, and that's something we really take pride in, and it's important that we preserve that. So any contributions that come, and again, primarily our donations come from nation states. Any incremental money, it goes to work in the field. We obviously want to be as efficient as possible to do. We're very conscious of that, and being essentially a Swiss private entity, it allows us to be, we really take pride in not being a bureaucratic organization. We are very much concentrated on action in the field.
Awesome. That'll be all for today. Mark, thank you so much for joining Gajia and sharing so many in-depth insights into the working of Red Cross, the challenges you face, your team faces, and the tough decisions um, you all have to make. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellie, for your time and your interest in the International Red Cross.
This was 37th in the World the official podcast of the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. Please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment and rating on whichever streaming platform you use. To support the podcast, you can click the link in this podcast's description that says Support the Show. To read other insightful interviews and articles, please check out gajia.georgetown.edu.